When I saw the HOA cabin on my land, I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call the cops. I set a trap. 30 days later, she cut my fence on camera and lied about it to a judge. That's when everything ended. I've learned something over the years. You don't really understand what kind of person someone is when things are easy. You find out when there's land involved and paperwork and someone who thinks the rules bend for them. That morning started like most of my mornings do now, quiet, predictable. The kind of quiet you only get when you've lived long enough to earn it. I woke up before sunrise, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and stepped out onto the porch while the air was still cool. Pine, damp earth, no traffic, no HOA newsletters taped to my door, just birds and wind moving through trees that had been there longer than anyone currently alive. I have a routine. Every morning I walk part of my boundary line. Not because I'm paranoid, because my father taught me something when I was young. Land doesn't protect itself. Over the years, I've dealt with small things. Hikers who wandered too far, someone pitching a tent where they shouldn't. Once, a couple tried to park an RV near the creek. Those situations usually ended with a conversation and an apology. Most people respect boundaries once they realize they've crossed one. That's why what I saw that morning made my stomach drop. At first, it didn't register as a problem, just a shape. Straight lines where there shouldn't be any, something rigid cutting through the natural curve of the forest. I stopped walking and looked again, squinting through the branches. It wasn't a tent. It wasn't a shed. It was a cabin. New lumber, clean angles, glass windows catching the early light. The kind of structure that takes planning, money, and confidence. The kind of thing no one builds by accident. I didn't rush toward it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't feel angry. What I felt was something colder. Because when someone builds like that deep inside land they don't own, they're not hoping you won't notice. They're testing you. I stood there for a long moment listening to the forest wake up around me. Then I pulled out my phone, opened the GPS, parcel lines, survey overlays, coordinates I knew by heart. I checked once, then twice, then I cross-referenced it with my father's original survey. There was no mistake. The cabin sat well inside my boundary, not near it, not brushing it, inside. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't sloppy research. This was someone betting that I'd hesitate, that I'd complain, that I'd argue, that I'd get tired. People like that don't fear confrontation. They fear documentation. I took a few photos, nothing dramatic. Wide angles, detail shots, time and location stamped automatically. The kind of images that don't argue, they just exist. Then I turned around and walked back toward the house, coffee still warm in my hand. I didn't call anyone, not yet. Because react emotionally and you lose control. I wasn't interested in reacting. I was interested in gathering ammunition. I wanted to see exactly how far they would go when they thought no one was watching. That cabin wasn't the problem. It was the invitation. And before the sun was fully up, I had already decided how I was going to answer it. I didn't go back to the cabin right away. That might sound strange, but rushing in is how you miss details. I've learned that over the years. Whether it's machinery, contracts, or people, haste hides things. So I finished my coffee, let the morning settle, then I grabbed my truck keys and drove the long way around, approaching the site from the lower ridge instead of the trail I normally used. I parked the truck well back and walked to the edge of the clearing. I stood there longer than I needed to, not angry, not confused, clear. This wasn't about a cabin. It was about leverage. HOAs don't move fast unless they think time is on their side. They build first, argue later. They rely on momentum. If something stands long enough, people stop questioning it. If they stop questioning it, it becomes established. And once it's established, they call it tradition. I wasn't going to let it reach that stage. That's when I made my first move. I walked back to the truck and pulled out two things I always keep behind the seat, a steel T-post and a roll of bright red private property no trespassing signs, the cheap kind. Loud, impossible to miss. I didn't put them right next to the cabin, that would have been obvious. Instead, I walked down the faint path I'd noticed earlier, the one leading back toward the HOA subdivision. I followed it until it narrowed, right where anyone coming from their side would have to pass through. That's where I drove the post into the ground. One sign, chest high, facing their direction, clean, legal, undeniable. I stepped back and looked at it for a moment. Then I took a photo. Wide shot, close up, GPS coordinates burned into the image. I wasn't blocking anything yet. I wasn't confronting anyone. I was drawing a line. If they respected the law, that sign would be the end of it. If they didn't, I'd have exactly what I needed. I turned around and walked back to the truck, already knowing the answer. Because people who build like that don't back down when they're warned, they escalate. And now, the next move was theirs. The sign survived the night. I know that because the next morning, before the coffee had finished brewing, my phone chimed. A motion alert. One of the trail cameras along the lower ridge had picked something up. I didn't rush. I poured the coffee first, sat down, took a sip, then I opened the clip. Headlights cut through the trees, an unfamiliar SUV rolled to a stop right where the path narrowed. Doors opened, voices carried low and irritated. A flashlight beam swept through the brush, then stopped right on the sign. Someone laughed, not nervous laughter, annoyed laughter. The kind that says, "Who does this guy think he is?" A woman stepped into frame, blonde bob, neat jacket, clipboard tucked under one arm like it belonged there. She leaned in, read the sign, and shook her head slowly. The smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. She said something I couldn't hear clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. Dismissive, certain. She pointed at the sign, then down the path toward the cabin. One of the men gestured like he wanted to just pull it out right then. She stopped him with a raised hand. Not yet. That was my first look at Karen. By mid-morning, she was at my gate. I didn't hear her pull up. I heard the engine stop, then the sound of a car door closing harder than necessary. When I stepped out onto the porch, she was already walking toward me, clipboard in hand, posture straight, smile fixed like she was about to explain something for my own benefit. "Good morning," she said before I'd said a word. "I'm Karen Westbrook, president of the HOA." She said it slowly, deliberately, like a title I was supposed to respect. Behind her stood 3 others, 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing HOA-branded polos. One of the men looked bored, the other looked uncomfortable. The woman kept her eyes on her phone. Karen glanced past me toward the trees, then back at my face. "We noticed a sign this morning," she said, "along the access trail." I waited. "It's causing some confusion," she continued. "That area has traditionally been used by our community." There it was, not a question, a declaration. I nodded once. "It's my land." Her smile tightened just a fraction. "Well," she said, tapping her clipboard lightly, "this section has historically been treated as shared space. There's been a cabin there for no." I said, calm, even. "There hasn't." She blinked, not from surprise, from irritation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pull out papers. I didn't gesture toward the woods. I let the silence stretch. Karen recovered quickly. "Perhaps you're not familiar with the local arrangements," she said. "Our board approved the structure as a community retreat. It's well within our jurisdiction." That's when I asked my first real question. "When did the board vote on it?" Her eyes flicked to the clipboard, then back to me. "It was discussed internally," she said. "I don't have the minutes on hand, but I'm not asking about discussion," I said. "I'm asking about a vote." The man standing to her left shifted his weight, just slightly. He didn't look at me. He looked down at the gravel. Resignation. Karen cleared her throat. "The board authorized me to proceed." "That's not a vote," I said. Her smile tightened again. "Look," she said, lowering her voice, "you just moved back here. There's no need to start things off on the wrong foot. We value cooperation." Unquote. "So do I said. She nodded, mistaking that for agreement. "That sign," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the woods, "it needs to come down. It's misleading." I met her eyes. "The sign stays." Her jaw set. "You don't have the authority to restrict access," she said. "I do," I replied, "on my land." "You're creating a problem where there doesn't need to be one," she snapped. "No," I said, "I'm documenting one." That's when she broke. She turned just enough to shield her face from me and said, low and sharp, "Take care of it." The uncomfortable man hesitated. "Just a second." Karen noticed. She looked at him like hesitation was betrayal. "Now," she said. I didn't move. I didn't stop them. I didn't say another word. They left and I stood on the porch long after the sound of the SUV disappeared down the road. I didn't check the cameras right away. I didn't need to because I'd left the sign standing and Karen had just ordered her people to remove it, which meant the next time I watched that footage, it wouldn't be a misunderstanding. It would be a crime. They came back that afternoon, not late, not under cover of darkness, broad daylight. That told me everything I needed to know. People who think they're wrong wait for night. People who think they're untouchable don't. The alert hit my phone while I was in the workshop, hands dusty, radio low. I didn't stop what I was doing. I finished tightening the bolt, wiped my hands, then picked up the phone. Same camera, same stretch of trail. The SUV rolled in slow this time, confident. Doors opened. Karen wasn't there. She didn't need to be. She'd already given the order. Two men stepped into frame. One of them I recognized, the one who'd hesitated on my porch. He looked around first, checked the trees, checked the ground. The other didn't bother. He went straight for the sign. No discussion, no hesitation. He reached into the back of the SUV and pulled out a pair of bolt cutters, lined them up on the twisted steel wire holding the sign to the post. One squeeze, the wire snapped clean. The sign slid down and hit the dirt. The man who'd hesitated earlier exhaled slowly, like he was hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The other man stepped forward and kicked the fallen sign out of the way, hard. Then, without a word, he planted his boot against the steel T-post and leaned into it with his full weight. Once, twice, metal groaned. On the third shove, the post bent forward, angling off-center like a broken tooth. That was the moment. Not the cut wire, not the fallen sign. The moment someone decided damage wasn't enough. They needed to make a point. The hesitant man turned his face away from the camera, hands on his hips, jaw tight. He didn't stop it. He just didn't want to be seen watching. The other man laughed, short, sharp, dismissive. They dragged the sign into the brush, kicked dirt over the base of the post, and walked back to the SUV like this was routine, like private property was an inconvenience, not a boundary. The engine started, gravel crunched, and they were gone. I watched the clip once, then again, then frame by frame. Clear faces, clear actions, clear intent, timestamp, GPS overlay, no ambiguity. I didn't feel anger. I felt confirmation. Because now the question wasn't who owns the land. It was who knowingly destroyed clearly marked private property after being warned. That evening, I didn't replace the sign. That was deliberate. People think escalation means reacting louder, faster, bigger. It doesn't. Sometimes escalation means freezing the scene exactly as it is. I left the bent post right where it stood, took photographs from every angle, close-ups of the cut wire, wide shots showing the angle of the post, measured the distance to the nearest survey marker, logged the time, logged the footage, backed everything up in 3 places. Then I wrote, not an email, not a text, a letter. Clean, formal, boring. The kind of document that doesn't threaten, it records. I addressed it to every HOA board member by name, certified mail, signature required, digital copies sent with read receipts. I laid out the facts. The sign had been legally placed on my property. The individuals involved had been verbally warned. The sign had been cut down. The post had been intentionally damaged. The incident was captured on video. I attached still frames, timestamps, coordinates. Then I added one paragraph at the end, just one. It stated that all structures, materials, or improvements currently located on my land were unauthorized, that the HOA had 30 days to remove them, and that after that period, anything remaining would be considered abandoned property and handled accordingly. No insults, no emotion, just consequence. Karen responded within hours, not to me, to everyone else. A community-wide email, bold subject line, words like misunderstanding, safety concern, shared access. She claimed the sign had been removed to prevent injury. She accused me of creating hostility. She warned residents not to engage with me directly. She didn't deny the act, she reframed it. And reframing, once the facts are locked, is an admission. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. Instead, the next morning, I replaced the sign. Same spot, same height, same wording. But this time, beneath it, I added a second notice, laminated, clean font. This area is under video surveillance. No threats, no warnings, just reality. I drove the post in deeper than before, took photos, logged the time, logged the coordinates, then I walked away. If Karen wanted to claim confusion, she just lost that option. If she wanted to escalate again, she'd be doing it knowing she was being recorded. Either way, the path forward had narrowed. And if she crossed that line one more time, she wouldn't be testing my patience. She'd be testing a prosecutor. I didn't rush to rebuild anything. That's a mistake people make when they think momentum is about speed. It isn't. Momentum is about direction, and right now Karen was already moving exactly where I wanted her to go. So, I waited one full day. I let the bent post stand, let the cut wire rust just enough to look real, let the photos sit quietly in my files. I wanted distance between the first act and the second, space, separation, because patterns matter. On the second morning, I loaded the truck. Real fence this time, not symbolic, not cheap. 8 FT steel T-posts, heavy gauge field fencing, proper clips, a post driver with enough weight to make the ground answer when it hit. I wasn't blocking a view. I wasn't hiding anything. I was asserting control. I followed the same path Karen's people had used, the same narrow choke point between the trees. That mattered. You don't fence the whole forest, you fence the access. You make the choice obvious. I drove the first post deep, then the second, then the third. Each strike rang solid, a clean, honest sound, the sound of something being set, not threatened. As I worked, I spoke out loud, not for drama, for the record. This fence marks private property. Unauthorized entry is trespassing. Clear, calm, documented. By noon, the fence was up. Tight, straight, properly clipped, no gaps big enough to argue about. I added 2 signs this time, one at eye level, one lower, where you couldn't miss it unless you were deliberately not looking. Then I walked the fence line slowly and filmed it end to end. No cuts, no edits, just a steady walk showing the posts, the wire, the signs, and the surrounding trees. I ended the video by panning to one of my survey markers and holding the frame for a full 10 seconds. No ambiguity. That afternoon, Karen emailed me. Short, sharp, written like a command pretending to be a request. She claimed the fence obstructed established community access.